The Los Angeles Rams found themselves caught between a rock and a hard place entering this offseason, coming from the highs of a Super Bowl win to the lows of a 5-12 season. This is One Take Thursday, where I do a video in one take because I don't have time to make a dedicated, good, long video to each team that I would like to talk about. And yeah, this is my solution to that, with the first team being the LA Rams. And the Rams had to balance three things this offseason, starting with getting under the cap. Yeah, this was rough. This was very rough, and they just have to eat shit cap-wise this season. Because to get beneath the cap, there were four major cap casualties, 2 trades, 2 guys being released. And looking at the 2 trades, one being Jalen Ramsey dealt to the Dolphins for a 3rd round pick and tight end Hunter Long. Yeah, is he worth more than a 3rd round pick talent-wise? Of course Jalen Ramsey is. But the market dictates the value, and the market for a guy who I believe still has 3 years left on his contract with a pretty high cap hit number is relatively small. Not a lot of teams can take that on. Not a lot of teams are willing to take that on. As I should say. And the Dolphins, as they do their kind of quote-unquote all-in season, they were willing to do it. So more power to them. Looking at the other deal, this one was rough. Allen Robinson traded to the Steelers to move up 17 picks in the 7th round, going from 251 to 234. And the Rams are eating, I want to say, $13 million of his salary, or maybe it was $12 million, something along those lines, resulting in those two players being the Rams' largest dead cap hits going into this season, with Robinson's cap hit being $21.45 million and Jalen Ramsey's being $19.6 million. Not far behind him, though, as a player the Rams were forced to cut in Leonard Floyd, totaling up to $19 million in dead cap this season. This one was rough because cutting him only cleared, I want to say, $3 million in cap space, but they literally had no choice to get beneath the cap. That's an awful spot to be in when that is your only real solution. Floyd actually just recently signed with the Bills, and the Bills just extended Mr. Ed Oliver. That's pretty nuts. I might talk about them next week. But yeah, and the 4th and final guy that had to be a cap casualty, Bobby Wagner, after just one season of a 5-year, over $50 million contract. It's rough to see Robinson and Wagner both already gone, considering pretty big deals that they signed, as the Rams signed a lot. Actually, I guess spent a lot of money last offseason, which is another layer to why the 5-12 season is just so much more tragic. To win a Super Bowl, spend so much money, a gross amount of money, in the hopes to get better and retain your guys. Yeah, it all fell apart, which there were a lot of injuries, which we will talk about. But yeah, looking at the extensions they have, and I guess kind of transitioning to my second point, you want to get back to a competitive point. I don't necessarily, actually, I'll talk about what that competitive point is, but it's a rough thing to kind of gauge because Matthew Stafford just signed a 4-year, $160 million contract. Unless he retires, which at least this year he isn't, he is your guy for 3 years. Not a bad thing whatsoever. Cooper Kupp signed a massive contract. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Obviously, very worth it. Had one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time in 2021. And the third guy, obviously, being Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive players of all time, getting a 3-year, $90 million contract after kind of gauging retirement and not playing towards the back half of last year. How severe his injury was is kind of funny to think about. But you want to get back to a competitive point. While you're spending so much money on your big 3, and you couldn't do that. I guess you couldn't improve your roster through free agency this year. They had to make so many cuts just to get to the point where they are now, which they only have like $1 million in cap space following their draft class. So that's a good transition. They had to get better through the draft, and unfortunately, well, They had a lot of picks, but only one top 40 selection. Point 3, in my opinion, was to get younger. Add youth to this team because they had so many veterans for so many years, and them all basically, besides 3, have left due to retirement or just free agency hitting or now trades. They need to get younger and kind of build their own guys because you look at their depth chart even after the draft, shit's rough. It's a rough depth chart, but luckily for them, that get younger point was not hard as they drafted 14 guys, and I want to say the number was 24 UDFAs. And it totals to them being the youngest roster in the NFL as of June 8th, as they still don't have a full 90-man roster. They're sitting at 87, but they are, as of this very second, the youngest roster in football, which is definitely something that they need as they just kind of have to eat shit for one season cap space wise. So looking at the draft, I kind of want to talk about three selections and talk about why I like them, because I'm not going through every one of the 14 players. Of course, that's not going to happen. I don't have an hour to record this video, but just kind of doing a big overview. They drafted someone at every position besides inside linebacker. They sprayed from the hip to every single position group. I guess besides center too, but Steve Avila can play that spot. But yeah, they sprayed from the hip. And, you know, as some teams, they only have 1 or 2 lottery tickets, which I consider to be like 6th to 7th round picks. Because like, those are kind of like your lottery tickets. You just draft them and pray it works. They had like 12. A lot. So, yeah, let's kind of just talk about the Rams' first selection being Steve Avila, guard out of TCU. I don't know if it's Avila or Avila. I forgot the pronunciation, so don't kill me if I'm doing it wrong. Sorry about it. But yeah, guard and offensive line in general was their biggest need because they sustained so many injuries. I want to say the number was 13 different starting offensive line combinations. That almost killed Matthew Stafford. They almost murdered him, and that's saying something considering Stafford is a tough son of a bitch. They almost killed him, and hopefully we pray that Steve Avila can just plug and play directly into that left guard spot. That's where our lads has him lifted in their depth chart, and hopefully kind of looking over at that right guard spot, old buddy Logan Bruss, 3rd round pick in 2022 who did not play a snap due to injury for his rookie season, can plug and play into that right guard spot beside Rob Havenstein, who was the only Rams offensive lineman that really missed no time last season, and he's pretty damn good. So I said Havenstein. I'm sorry, I meant Havenstein. But yeah, the Rams, they needed offensive line continuity, and I think with their first pick, they are getting that. They are getting their best shot at that, and that's not necessarily my opinion that Steve Avila was the best offensive lineman left on the board. I'm not scouting these fucking guys, but the guys who are scouting those guys, aka the Los Angeles Rams, according to the 11 Personnel podcast on The Athletic, which is like their Rams podcast, Steve Avila was ranked first on their board following day 1. So they got their favorite guy. Good for the Rams. Moving further down the draft board to talk about the other 2 picks that I like the most, let's just stick with the TCU guys. As near the beginning of round 6, the Rams drafted 2022 Jim Thorpe winner and All-American, first team All-American, may I say, Travius Hodges Tomlinson, cornerback from TCU. Those accolades speak for themselves of why I like this pick, especially in the 6th round. You can levy criticism to the Rams for them not selecting a cornerback much sooner, because just looking at the depth chart and looking at how many of these guys played last season through snap counts, it's a lot of young, short players. It's a lot of smaller guys that have little to no experience in the NFL, and that's rough. That is rough, as you know, Travius Hodges Tomlinson also fits the bill of a shorter DB, but I just think the Jim Thorpe and the first team All-American pick, this kid's scrappy too. I watched a little bit of stuff on him. He's scrappy. I like him. He just seems to have good ball skills, but his height was definitely a massive factor in him dropping the way he did Talking about another player that dropped pretty far in my opinion, Puka Nacua, 5th round pick, wide receiver out of BYU, joins a pretty good group of receivers, and I think he's going to fit right in, as Sean McVay is already praising him at OTAs, saying, quote, he's pretty special. And when I watch a little bit of stuff on him, he's 6'2" and has yards after catch after yards after catch. This guy is 6'2", and at least in game speed, looks like he runs like a gazelle. He fits right in with Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Ben Skowronek. The reason why he dropped to round 5 and why he was not picked much sooner, as I'm levying these praises, there's a reason why he was picked in round 5. A lot of injuries concerned for old Puka, for old Mr. Nacua. But those are my 3 favorite picks of this draft. They had 11 more, so I do offer the question, if you've made it this far, I assume you are a Rams fan. What are your favorite picks? Do you like the other guys? Because, you know, Byron Young has a pretty crazy story, but yeah. What do you think of the Rams' 14 draft picks, as they spent a lot of lottery tickets on a lot of different positions, as these guys are going to be getting playing time? A lot of these guys are going to be getting playing time and potentially even starting roles, because the roster is bad and it is very young, as 14 of these guys, we don't know if all 14 will make the team, but 14 guys were drafted. That's nuts. That is crazy. So that's a good transition to their expectations going into this season. And in my opinion, the expectation is maybe they can slip into a playoff spot at the end of the year, the way the Packers, Lions, and Steelers all came very close to doing. And the reason why I'm talking about slipping into a spot is not just because I believe a lot of young guys will be playing, but also because their schedule is rough to start the year. In week 1, you got Seattle. Week 2, you got the 49ers. Week 3, you got Cincy. Week 5, you got the Eagles. That's rough. That is tough. That is terrible, actually. And another reason why I say they slip in and potentially go on a run at the end of the season is because, you know, the young guys will have that experience, that growth throughout the year, and their back half of the schedule, not too shabby. You look at, I don't know which week this is, but the last game of November, they're playing the Cardinals. Cardinals are going to be trash. Next week, you got the Browns. They're a wild card considering Deshaun Watson. Ravens are the Ravens. They're pretty fucking good. Commanders are going to be average. Saints, I have a video potentially coming out next week, but they're going to be average. Giants, they're a wild card with Daniel Jones. And then to end the year, you do have the 49ers. I get those games don't sound simple considering the Rams are most likely not going to be good, especially to start the year next year, but they're a lot better than the start of the season, and those are all winnable games. Towards the end of the year, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 winnable games in the last 7 weeks of the year, and they could potentially go on that run to push for a spot the way I previously mentioned the Packers, Lions, and Steelers all came pretty damn close to doing last season. Maybe the Rams with Sean McVay as their head coach. They just got they got Matt LaFleur as their offensive coordinator, and a defense that's going to be extraordinarily young. But Aaron Donald's going to be there. So, what do you think? What are your expectations for the Rams next season? And what are your thoughts on the picks? As the Rams definitely just had to eat shit this year. So, think about that though. If they can go from getting eating shit cap space perspective to potentially making a playoff spot, that'd be pretty sweet, because they're not going to win the division. But that'd be pretty sweet. So, yeah, I think I've ran out of steam. About 15 minutes. That's kind of crazy. I thought this video was going to be like 7 minutes. But, yeah, hope you enjoyed and have a great one.